Before we get started, there will be spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to follow. So, with news of Cour 4 potentially on the horizon, now's the time to start ramping up excitement for the finale of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. There's potentially so much left to see, including some incredible reveals. I made a video a little like this one, outlining new additions to the series that I would love to see back when Cour 2 first released, and I think, looking back, I got maybe half or just under half of what I discussed in that video, which I don't think is too bad going. Things like the Zero Division versus the Schutzstaffel being extended, for example, but what's interesting about Cour 2 versus Cour 4 is that the story had the potential, in my opinion, to be blown much wider open back then. Cour 4, made up of the second half of the Varvelt arc and the end of the series, is more constrained, more limited by the linear nature of this final stretch of chapters taking us through to the end of the series. Meaning I think there's a higher chance of actually getting some of the 9 new additions I have down on this list today. As we know, they are working with a lot of additional time, a lot of free space essentially, and there's only so many things that are left that we need to see. About a month ago I made a video listing the craziest upcoming moments in Cour 4 from the manga. Well, today, these are the totally new additions that I want to see happen, that need to happen before the series comes to an end, to help not only end the 1000-Year Blood War arc on a strong note, but ultimately make the arc feel more complete. These additions today did not appear in the manga in any shape or form, and are essentially a wish list of things I want to see. Of course, make sure to let me know what brand new additions you want to see in Cour 4, whether they be new fights, new flashbacks, new lore reveals, whatever it is, let me know down in the comments. Before we get started on the video, guys, consider, if you haven't done already, hitting subscribe down below. It really does help out the channel, and your support is greatly appreciated. And also consider checking out my other channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games. Maybe giving a subscribe over there as well. We're doing a lot of coverage at the moment, as is the Summer Games Fest happening right now. There's a lot of big shows happening. I'm trying to talk about them as much as I possibly can, in view of the way I discuss things over there on the channel. So if you're into that at all, consider supporting. Your help would go a very long way indeed. So first up, in my last video where I discussed the best fights from each arc, I mentioned how I felt the Kisuke and Yoruichi versus Isshin fight was great, but lacking in depth. And while I do love that fight, I feel like it doesn't stack up well to comparisons with the previous 2 Schutzstaffel battles, which are absolutely layered with substance from start to finish, including extensive flashbacks and lore drops for the main characters involved. Well, the main heroes anyway. Logic would dictate then that Kisuke and Yoruichi would have received similar treatment by the time their fight rolled around, but it simply never happened. And yet, a flashback for Kisuke and Yoruichi showing their history, the time they spent together when they were younger, perhaps even their first ever meeting, and why characters like Kisuke and Tessai grew up in the Shihoin mansion, is something that Kubo himself said he wanted to include, and that he'd even drawn a draft version of it back in the day, but it clearly never made it in, likely due to time restrictions. So a flashback for Kisuke and Yoruichi during their battle with Isshin feels like a bit of a shoo-in to me. I don't want to be too concrete about that, but I really do hope we get it. Of the 9 inclusions on this list, I don't know, this kind of feels like one of the absolute most likely to me. I don't expect a flashback during Gerard's fight because, well, Byakuya, Kenpachi, and Hitsugaya have already received extensive flashbacks in the past, even detailing their origins, unless we get a flashback for Gerard, which I would love, but sadly, as much as I can hope, I don't expect to get flashbacks for any of the Schutzstaffel, as much of a shame as it is. But yeah, Kisuke and Yoruichi, that feels realistic, that feels likely, and I'd be more than happy to see it. I think the anime could do a great job of fleshing out their relationship in this fight and elevating this fight, which is otherwise great, to a similar level as Mayuri vs Pernida and Kyoraku vs Leal. But while we might not get a flashback for Gerard, that doesn't mean his character and the logic behind him and his existence can't be actually explained to us in the present day. In the manga, we don't really know anything about this guy. Supposedly, he's the vessel of the heart of the Soul King, which is cool in concept, and that seems to feed into his ability to resurrect from death over and over again, embodied by this idea of the miracle. But, well, that's about it. There are so many curiosities about Gerard specifically, even in just his character design. His weird, inhuman eyes, the fact that he doesn't have fingernails in his Volstendish, the fact his hair looks like it's made of plastic in his Volstendish, and of course, the fact he seems to be harbouring a gigantic Quincy cross within his chest, perhaps even acting as his heart. Again, another metaphor, seemingly, for his Soul King connection. One that's capable of pulling his body back together again, even when split in two by Kenpachi's Bankai. So, for the next new addition, I want to see Gerard's Quincy Cross Cour actually involved in the story. Even if the captains are unable to kill Gerard, there needs to be some acknowledgement of this giant Quincy's weird core that can seemingly bring him back to life over and over again, just so we're not constantly speculating on Gerard's nature. There needs to be more discussion in general, to be honest, surrounding the heart of the Soul King. Even though they don't get a lot, the right and left arms of the Soul King do get considerably more lore overall, to the point where the heart kind of feels like an afterthought in the manga. I've already laid out my prediction before as to what this character really is, that Gerard isn't really a human at all, or at least hasn't been a human for quite some time, and is in fact a golem-like creature whose very existence revolves around this almost unbreakable core. Perhaps a living example of how the Soul King's very heart can bestow life on things. Either way, I want to know more, and I feel like that can come about naturally in the present-day fight. We've talked about this next one plenty of times before, so I won't belabour it too much, but I feel like this is something that virtually everyone wants to see, and that's Isshin and Ryūken actually getting involved in the battle and fighting someone. This is a clear-cut, obvious choice, and I'll be amazed if it doesn't happen to some degree. In the manga, Ryūken arrives in Varvelt to give Uryū the still silver arrowhead, which he later uses to help defeat Yūhar-bark. An undeniably important role then, and Ryūken acts as a critical stepping stone to bringing down the Quincy King and essentially enacting the Ishida family revenge. But I'd still like to see him actually fighting someone, maybe alongside his son. Ryūken is perhaps the coolest character in Bleach that never gets to do anything in the series, so this feels like a necessity to me, especially with the improvements made to Uryū's role in the anime. This would be the perfect capstone to that development. Meanwhile, there's Isshin, who I'll admit I think is a little harder to organically fit into the story at this late stage. In the manga, he just sort of stands there with Ryūken like a lame duck, so really anything new would be an improvement. So I think there are two options here. Either Isshin meets up with Ichigo, and perhaps the two of them battle Yūhar-bark briefly together. Maybe Isshin is grievously injured in the battle, raising the stakes even more, which I'd quite like. Or Isshin goes to help his former third seat, Hitsugaya, in the battle against Gerard, which I'd also quite like. Considering the anime has made a point of showing us that Matsumoto is also still around compared to the manga, I could absolutely see them setting up Isshin's long-awaited reunion in the showdown with Gerard. It's also not gone unnoticed that in terms of the chronology, Isshin and Ryūken have shown up in Varvelt in the anime over 10 chapters early. And this next one is a pretty obvious inclusion too, and one that I can't help but feel like the anime has absolutely been building to all this time, unless I've somehow been reading it wrong completely, and that's a fully fledged flashback for Adnias himself. Even if it's just an uninterrupted, clear view version of the flashback that's been sporadically teased to us, I'll absolutely take it. I just need something. In Cour 2, the fate of the Soul King was briefly shown during Ichigo's training in Irazu Sandor, while in Cour 3 we actually got to see snippets of Adnias himself beginning the process of splitting the primordial world into three, and the chaos it caused a young Yūhar-bark when his life was totally uprooted. But it's Cour 4 now. Enough of the cryptic teases. It's time to get a full and complete look at this guy and what actually happened all those years ago. What's going on with Ichigo? He was there at the moment of Adnias' fall. Why is he so sinister? Did he cover the newly reborn Yhwach in darkness when the cycle of rebirth was created and the Quincy King was thrust into it? And also, how similarly does the anime's version of these past events line up with those of Can't Fear Your Own World? Because for a while, Can't Fear Your Own World was really our only reference point, our only insight into this plotline, but it seems like the anime is potentially taking a slightly different route. We won't know unless we get to see more, and with Yhwach now sitting atop the throne of the world, it feels like the perfect opportunity for some introspection. Or maybe he'll try and get Ichigo to truly understand the world's original sin in an effort to turn him to his side, why it needs to be undone. He's already tried to show him bits and pieces of the past in Core 3, so we could easily, I think, follow on from that. Honestly, this is probably what I want to see the absolute most, and I think I've been saying that since the anime began, so fingers crossed Adnias comes through for us. Okay, and another new addition I'd love to see comes in the form of a totally separate subplot, one that could and should easily be running alongside everything else going on in Varvelt, and that's the rescuing of Tia Harribel. In the manga, Harribel is revealed to have been captured and imprisoned by Yhwach as early as, like 5 chapters into the arc, and is then never seen again. Can't Fear Your Own World reveals that Neliel and Grimjo later broke her out of prison during the Varvelt arc, but I mean, this is something we need to see in action, I think. The anime has a great chance to rectify this by including this subplot here, even very briefly in the final set of episodes, but will it? This is a difficult one, as Grimjo's story so far has played out exactly the same way as it does in the manga, which will inevitably lead to him killing Askin but then nearly being wiped out by the Gift Ball Deluxe. So when could a subplot like this take place, realistically? Now, to be honest, thanks to the structure of the story and how it looks like Core 4 is shaping up, I actually think there's plenty of time to show it. Let's say Askin's fight is over by the end of episode 2. It's probably going to be the first fight to take place. Nell gets Grimjo out of the gift ball, and we don't see them for a while as they recuperate. A few episodes down the line, 4 or 5 episodes down the line, at the halfway point perhaps, we see a battered and bruised Harribel still locked in a prison cell now in Varvelt, only for Nell and Grimjo to barge in, sending some Quincy Soldat flying. Maybe Nell mentions something about Ichigo is currently fighting the Quincy King up above, so they had a window of opportunity to come and rescue her. Anything like that would be great, and I think would work perfectly well. The Arrancar were already underserved by the 1,000-year Blood War arc, so this would be a fantastic opportunity to give them a little closure. Next up, there's a pretty big question that needs answering in Core 4, and I'm actually somewhat confident that we'll get it. How did Uryū survive Yhwach's Alsvalen? What makes him so special as to be granted the position of Yhwach's heir? What power does he have that circumvents Yhwach's own, or is it just the antithesis? Not only was this never revealed in the manga, but the idea was weirdly resurrected and teased right near the end of the story, only to then never be resolved. During his battle with Uryū, upon seeing Uryū's Shrift in action for the first time, Hashwolf muses that it might be able to counter Yhwach's own power, but then we never see that happen, or at least we don't explicitly see Uryū using the antithesis in any way to help defeat Yhwach. Of course, many of us believe that Uryū maybe uses the antithesis when he shoots Yhwach with the arrow, hence why the Quincy King doesn't see it coming, but for now it's just speculation. However, I think it was in the final episode of Core 3, a rather tantalizing flashback was teased, showing the day Yhwach used his original Alsvalen to steal the powers of Quincy's worldwide that he deemed impure, including Uryū's mother, Katagiri. However, the anime's depiction of this event was remarkably different from what little we'd been told about it before. Now, the information did come from Isshin, who wasn't there on the day. He didn't see exactly what happened to Katagiri, and presumably what he found out about it was relayed to him by Ryūken. But as Isshin explains to Ichigo during Everything But the Rain, Katagiri, along with Masaki, was struck by the Owl's Valen, and since she was frail already, died soon after. But that doesn't seem to be what happens at all. In the anime, Katagiri's new maid, presumably a gemished Quincy herself, is taken out by the Owl's Valen when it activates, while Katagiri herself seems to be completely unaffected. Even crazier is the fact that Uryū is also clearly targeted and affected by the power too, and it looks as though it nearly kills him. Although we don't see it properly, it is heavily implied. Katagiri activates a Volsten dish or something, likely doing something that exchanged her life for her son's, saving him but dooming herself. However, we don't know what's really going on here. I speculated in the wake of that episode a few things, like maybe Uryū inherently bore a form of the antithesis, and perhaps accidentally swapped his and his mother's positions in that moment, or maybe she somehow forced it to happen. Either way, I want answers, and considering that surprising flashback in Core 3, I think we're going to get them. Ichigo's true Bankai Tensa Zangetsu is one of the biggest points of lingering contention surrounding this very final portion of Bleach. We waited such a long time to see the apex of the fruits of his training, only for the Bankai to be instantly broken by Yūhabak. Now, at the time, I remember thinking that this was a pretty neat upset, a clever little twist that only served to demonstrate how absurdly powerful Yūhabak was in the moment, how seemingly unwinnable this situation was. But the problem is, Ichigo's true Bankai never really recovers from this embarrassment. It never actually really gets its moment. And it turns out that its grand reveal, well, it just sort of never happens. We were robbed of the true catharsis of finally seeing this Bankai in action in a big way, and it mostly falls flat in its other appearances following this moment. Now, the anime is going to keep Yūhabak breaking Ichigo's Bankai in. That's not going anywhere, as it was confirmed considering they spoiled that moment in the teaser trailer. The question is, what can be done to work around that moment, to help Tensa Zangetsu feel as mighty and as powerful as possible, to help it have its time in the sun, in the same way the two previous Bankai did. I've seen a lot of people saying that the anime should show Ichigo's true Bankai being revealed in all of its glory, and have him use it against Yūhabak in an amazing spectacle, only to then later reveal that Yūhabak is seeing the future before he then breaks the Bankai. Now, I don't think they'll do this, as neat as it would be, because the shock of the Bankai breaking is what makes it so impactful, but honestly, I certainly think that for manga readers, something like this would be preferable, giving the Bankai a real showcase before rendering it useless. Speaking of Bankai, Core 4 is set up nicely to reveal a brand new one or two, and there are some pretty obvious candidates. Now that it seems like the Vizard are going to be fighting Gerard, Love has the opportunity to reveal his Bankai, which would be pretty cool, though definitely the least exciting of the possibilities, but at the end of the day, I'll take any of them. Now, as we mentioned earlier, if Isshin does indeed join in the fighting, he could absolutely use his Bankai in battle against either Gerard or Yūhabak himself, and I think fans would love that. The biggest and craziest possibility of all, however, though, is of course Aizen, and that's maybe the one that I think is the most likely of the bunch, as insane as that sounds. Aizen teams up with Ichigo to battle Yūhabak in the Serete when all else fails, the very final battle of Bleach itself. It's a fantastic fight, but it only lasts about 3 chapters, if that. The anime has the chance to extend it in a truly meaningful way, and having Aizen reveal his Bankai would be, without question, an absolutely gigantic bombshell. I believe Kubo mentioned that the writer's room lost their minds when he mentioned a certain character doing something really cool. I'm paraphrasing in a big way there, but yeah, I still think he's talking about Aizen using Bankai. Though, of course, I could easily be wrong. And then finally, a pretty major new addition would simply be the immediate aftermath of the war. In the final chapter of the series, we do see, very briefly, the moment directly after Ichigo cuts Yūharbak in two, but it's just not enough. It's very jarring to spend 200 chapters on this war, and in the anime's case it'll be, 50 or so episodes with all of these characters who have been fighting so hard, who have been fighting to the death, all of the enormous changes that have affected the world around them over the course of this war. And then once the war is actually over, once it's won, we don't see anyone or anything. We don't get any reactions, we don't get any context, no story, no world building in the wake of the biggest battle to ever grace the world of Bleach. We just skip ahead 10 years instantly. Now, I understand why Kubo had to do it in the manga, but now we have a great opportunity to just spend some downtime with these characters in the immediate aftermath, picking themselves up after the war. Acknowledging their losses, celebrating their victories. Ichigo and Uryū coming together and talking, the restoration of Squad Zero, what happens to Varvelt in the wake of Yūharbak's defeat? Does it just crumble? Does it collapse out of the sky? Or does it magically return to being the royal palace? This is something else that Can't Fear Your Own World does brilliantly well, and if nothing else, I really would recommend people read the prologue of the light novel, as it is essentially an extension of the 1000-Year Blood War arc. It is the immediate aftermath that I wanted to see so much, and deals with a bunch of things that I have loved to have seen in the manga, like the return of Ichibei, like Nell and Grimjo rescuing Harribel, all of that. Well, now it's the anime's chance to give us something similar before the 10-year time skip, the epilogue, and I hope that they do. Show us the fates of the characters who, in the manga, completely vanished. Kisuke, Yoruichi, Komamura, Isshin, some of the Vizards and the like. The characters who partook in the war deserve that much. Okay, before we go, I do have one bonus new addition that I'd love to see, and I say this is a bonus because it really is a Hail Mary, even in comparison to the rest on this list, but I'd love some kind of a tease as to the future of the series. Whether that's hinting at an adaptation of the light novels or of the Hell arc's continuation, or something totally different, something like that at the end of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime would do an amazing job of ramping up the hype in an enormous way, letting fans know that no, Bleach isn't done, there's plenty more to look forward to ahead. Okay everyone, but that's it for today's video. As always, I do hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you took something of value away from it as well. It'll be interesting to see down the line when Core 4 is finally over just how many of these brand new additions we actually got, if any at all. Like I said, it was interesting for me to go back to that Core 2 video. I can't remember if we made one for Core 3, I'm not sure we did. But the Core 2 video, I went back to it and yeah, we did get some of the new additions I was hoping we would get, not all of them, but we did okay. And actually, some of those new additions did turn up in Core 3 in the end, like Ichigo versus Uryū, for example. So when the dust settles on Core 4, it'll be interesting to come back to this and see how much, if any of it, we actually got. And like I said at the start of the video, I am not confident, but I think that Core 4 is going to be fairly linear. It is following a much more linear structure in general. There's not a lot of room for, I would say, crazy experimentation, so I feel like much of what we've talked about today is the scope of what could be added, but again, I could be completely wrong, and I'd absolutely love to be surprised. Alright everyone, once again, thank you so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What brand new additions, things that didn't appear in the manga, would you love to see in Core 4 of the anime? I'd love to see your thoughts down in the comments below. Remember to consider hitting subscribe if you haven't done already. It does mean the absolute world. It makes a huge difference to the growth of the channel, to the health of the channel. And check out Mr. Tomo Talks Games as well if you're interested in that sort of thing, if you're interested in the games industry, anything like that. Consider dropping your support over there as well. Again, it makes a huge difference, and I am massively grateful. And speaking of being massively grateful, a massive thank you and a huge shout out goes out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon. Each and every one of you listed in the credits helps to make this channel possible, to be totally honest, and I really do appreciate your support. It goes a massively long way. If you want to support me over on Patreon, you can do just that as well to get your names in the credits just like this and to get every single video of mine absolutely free of YouTube ads. But again, if you're just watching here on YouTube, you're already supporting me enormously, and thank you so very much for that. Okay, everyone, until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.